We don't know whether Chicago Bears general manager Ryan Poles has gotten a contract extension yet or not, but his actions in the NFL draft and the offseason as a whole show a leader with a lot of job security and long-term thinking.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On the show today, I want to take a bigger picture look at what this offseason says about Ryan Poles and his status within the Chicago Bears organization, how his draft picks this year signal job security. These are the picks and an offseason in general that is a general manager who feels comfortable with where he is and his job security and his ability to build this team smart and in the long term, and doesn't have sort of a short-term focus on, oh gosh, I really just have to keep my job. And I think a lot of the evidence I've seen people say, well, he did this or this, and that could mean he's in trouble. To me, it says more about trying to turn over the Matt Eberflus era than it does trying to prepare for the potential departure of Ryan Poles. Because when you go into this year's draft, the Bears were very clearly focused on taking the best player available almost regardless of position. And we're not in a spot to try and focus on a specific position of need and reach for a player to fill that hole. And I think there were a number of times in this draft, maybe more so after the first round, where you could talk yourself into fairly easily convincing yourself that, hey, maybe a player at a position of need would have been or could have made a strong argument for them as a potential best player available. Like, yeah, with Colston Loveland in the 10th pick, I don't know that there's a lot of justifying anybody besides Loveland or Tyler Warren, the two tight ends there. Like, I think those two were clearly the best players available on the draft board. And if you tried to say, well, Michael Williams from Georgia, we saw him as the BPA, it's hard to sell somebody on even the next best pass rusher on the draft board being truly the best player available over these tight ends that look to have some game-changing ability there. But when you get to where the Bears were in the second round, with Luther Burden at 39 and then trading down from 41 instead of staying there and maybe taking a position of need right there in that spot, this was the draft class approach of a general manager who's not so worried about losing his job or making sure that, you got to win. Like, of course, you want to build a team to win as many games as possible every season, but not feeling that pressure to say, holy crap, we got to maximize 2025 so I can keep my job and make sure that I'll be able to be here in 2026 and 2027 and beyond. But a draft class that starts out with a tight end and a wide receiver at positions that you really didn't need, quote unquote, a tight end or a wide receiver really goes a long way there. You could have prioritized offensive line and pass rush and the biggest need positions that are going to fill the most important roles right away here. And of course, he does eventually get around and get back to it, but it wasn't like that was something that had to be a priority here. Like, these are long-term future picks, right? You draft Colston Loveland not specifically for what he's going to do in 2025. We talked a little bit about what he's going to do in 2025 on yesterday's podcast and about how the known injury he has coming out of the draft might slow down some of those year one expectations. But same thing for Luther Burden, right? Like, you draft those guys at positions where you already have established players ahead of them on the depth chart because you saw them as the best player available on your board, not because you saw them as the players who could make the biggest immediate year one impact on your roster. Those are draft picks for the next 5 years. Those are not so much draft picks for this year. They'll help this year, but Loveland and Burden's biggest impacts are not going to come in year one, and their impacts aren't needed as greatly in year one, right? But you could have stayed at that 39th pick, 2 picks after that 2 picks after 39 where the Bears took Burden. They could have taken TJ Sanders from South Carolina as a defensive tackle to boost the interior. Alfred Collins went 4 picks later at 43. And now you're past, where the Bears were. The Bears also had the 41st pick. So you could have taken Donovan Ezeriku from Boston College on the edge, or JT Tuimoloau from Ohio State goes to the Colts at 45. Like these are players at positions, and even you could throw in Ariante Ursary from Minnesota, right? Players that were there on the board that you could make an argument you could have called them best player available and people would have believed you, even if you were kind of maybe bumping them up a little bit because they were bigger positions of need and positions that can make bigger impacts right away in the rookie season. Or same thing with, one of the other running backs that was available at that time. I think RJ Harvey was the next running back that went off the board, but elsewhere in this draft, somebody like Caleb Johnson from Iowa goes in the middle of the 3rd round, or you got Cam Skedebo and Bashul Tutin at the beginning of the 4th round, right? Ryan Poles could have reached or prioritized at those positions that could have had more significant year 1 impacts. But instead, you've got somebody like Shamar Turner from Texas A&M is going to be a rotational player for the Bears, and he'll have an impact. But is he going to be a top flight playmaking difference maker right away year 1? Probably not. 4th round pick Ruben Hippolyte, definitely a longer term developmental type guy in this position. And then Burden's going to be your number 3 receiver. Colson's going to be, at least at first, your number 2 tight end. Those are not necessarily the instant impact spots for this Bears roster right now. You could have drafted a cornerback in the 1st or 2nd round there that could have competed to start right away as a rookie and been the starter opposite of Jalen Johnson. And boom, that makes your team even better in year 1. But he had the security and the luxury to sit there and say, this tight end is the best player available. Yeah, we don't really need a tight end, but he'll help us out in the long run, so let's get one. This wide receiver is the best player available. We just drafted a wide receiver in the 1st round last year, and we just locked up DJ Moore to a long-term contract, and you signed a couple of receivers in free agency. You really didn't need a wide receiver. I still think it's a good pick, but it's the point. The point being, it's the pick of a general manager who knows he can make those picks and didn't feel the pressure to make other, need type picks that are a lot more justifiable and easy to sell to the public and easy to sell to your scouts. It's no, this is a guy that we view as a best player available here, especially with those 3 second-round picks. Plus, getting a future 4th round pick in a trade, right? He's saying, oh, well, I'll enjoy the spoils of this trade down next year when I'm still here as the general manager, because he has that utmost confidence and faith, right? It wasn't about maximizing picks. I mean, they wanted more picks this year, but it wasn't all about maximizing picks this year. It was let's get that pick back that we gave up for Tooney so that me in the future will appreciate what I did. Not the next GM who takes over my job. No, I know it is going to be me. And that's the way that Ryan Poles generally approached this draft. And I've seen some people push back on that and say, well, this feels like it's Ben Johnson getting his guys and trying to replace some of Ryan Poles' guys that he doesn't like, and maybe he's sort of preparing Ben Johnson and Dennis Allen are sort of preparing the roster for themselves, for the next general manager to come in and continue getting players that they like. But I don't think it's quite that simple either, because yes, Poles has been the general manager for the players being acquired here, but he was also helping his previous coaching staff get the players that he wants. So I want to take a look at who the Bears have specifically replaced and why that feels like more of a reflection of Ben Johnson replacing Eberflus guys than trying to, unseat Poles' power over the roster next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. So whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action with FanDuel, because they make it super easy to stay in the game before tip-off and while the game's rolling. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Right now, FanDuel is making it that much more exciting and eager to get in on the action, whether it's these big Game 7s, everyone advancing into round 2, or not even the NBA playoffs. You can bet ahead on the football season, the baseball regular season, the hockey playoffs, soccer, tennis, boxing, you name it. They've got it all. And right now, they're helping you with $200 in bonus bets to add to that excitement if your first $5 bet hits. Because if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. And if that bet wins, you get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Ben Johnson clearly wanted to get some of his guys in this offseason, specifically in the NFL draft. And a lot of the later round, the day 3 picks, we're getting some Dennis Allen guys in the building. And you can see where it's like, well, wait a minute. Tight end, the Bears already had one of those. Wide receiver, the Bears already had one of those. Left tackle, the Bears do already have one of those. Defensive tackle, Ryan Poles drafted 2 of those just a couple of years ago. Wait a minute. Is this Ben Johnson getting his guys to replace Ryan Poles' guys in the long term and establish that, hey, I'm Ben Johnson, I run this roster, or I'm Dennis Allen and I run this roster, and you, Ryan Poles, are just a conduit to get us the players that we want, but we're really the ones in charge, and you're not on such secure footing after all. But I really see it as more of a Eberflus thing than a Ryan Poles thing because of what changes the Bears have made, who they've gotten rid of, and the players specifically in the draft that have come in to replace them, right? Like when you think about Luther Burden coming in at wide receiver, he's not really, he's replacing Keenan Allen, I suppose, but he's adding in to a wide receiver group there where they wanted that short area shiftiness ability to be able to run the Shane Waldron, Thomas Brown offense last season, that they wanted to have some rhythm passes to build in there for Caleb Williams out of the shotgun, a little RPO action, and get it to Keenan Allen as a crafty route runner over the middle of the field. But I think Ben Johnson comes in and looks at this and says, no, I want more speed at receiver. I want to be able to open plays up on play action and bootleg and rolling them out of the pocket, right? Like it doesn't have to be, 3-step drop, get open quickly. Like that's why we're rebuilding this offensive line also, so that you can take advantage of the athletes that you have on the outside, because he had speed in Detroit with Jamison Williams' long speed and Amon-Ra St. Brown's short area quickness, right? Like they had that kind of speed in Detroit, and this is Ben Johnson getting the kind of speed he wants, as opposed to like Keenan Allen's still a really talented player and can get open and has a value for an NFL offense. I'm sure he'll end up signing somewhere here still, but like they went and got Ben Johnson's guy to replace the Eberflus coaching staff's guy. Like I don't think Keenan Allen was like Ryan Poles' big guy. He traded a 4th-round pick for a veteran in the last year of his contract. That wasn't necessarily like Poles putting his stamp on a player he wants to build around. Like maybe Roma Dunze, but that's all going to work together all hunky-dory with all those guys in the wide receiver room. Same thing at tight end, I think, right? Yeah, Cole Kmet was a Ryan Poles draft pick that I think predated Matt Eberflus. He was drafted during the Matt Nagy era, if I'm not mistaken. But this is someone that Matt Eberflus and company signed to a contract extension and locked in for the long term and wanted to be a part of this offense. And I think Sam Laporta looks at it and says, hey, we would like to have more speed at that position, a more dynamic athlete. And it's not to say that they're getting rid of Cole Kmet, because I don't think that's the plan at all, at least not right away. I think we talked about this a little bit last week on the podcast, that I think Cole Kmet is perfectly safe for 2025. From there, after year 1, we'll see what happens. But for now, like we're going to see a lot of both Cole Kmet and Colston Loveland, and this is not an instant replacement type of thing. But it is Ben Johnson wanting to get his guy and his style of player, as opposed to what the Bears had already. Or somebody like Ozzie Trapillo, right, comes in at left tackle, and he's going to compete with Braxton Jones there. Braxton Jones was a Eberflus first draft pick who, there's a lot to like about Braxton Jones, and I've been a big Braxton Jones defender before, but he's someone who maybe isn't always the kind of physicality you want in the running game, and maybe doesn't anchor super well. So bring in the 6'8" left tackle / right tackle who can be a little bit more of a maul or a little bit more road grader, could be a little bit more aggressive at that tackle position. Like this, not that they're again not getting rid of Braxton Jones right away or anything, but they are in the long term here. And same kind of thing with like bringing some competition for Krana Magaji. Like it's like, sorry, like Ben Johnson didn't draft Krana Magaji, and maybe he's not quite the demeanor of offensive tackle. We'll see. I think Ben Johnson's going to leave everything open for those guys to succeed. He's not trying to get rid of anybody right away, but he's also going to bring in his guys that are more in his style of player to say, yep, this is what I want, as opposed to what the previous coaching staff wanted. Look no further than Shamar Turner coming in on the defensive line. Matt Eberflus on his defensive line, he kind of wanted all his defensive tackles to be hybrid nose tackle free techniques that were all really big. And Shamar Turner's a converted defensive end, right? He's much more in the Dennis Allen mold of defensive lineman, where, he bulked up to like 290-ish this past season, but Matt Eberflus wanted Gervon Dexter over 300, right? To be the three technique pass rusher. Dexter and Billings and Pickens were all relatively similar sizes and bigger than a lot of teams keep their three technique defensive tackle pass rusher. And Trapilo may end up being a full-time Shamar Turner may end up being a full-time defensive end when it's all said and done here. We'll see exactly how Dennis Allen wants to use him, but this is like classic Dennis Allen defensive lineman pick here to say, yeah, we're kind of turning over from the Eberflus style of lineman and we're getting our guys in here. It's not that like we're moving on from Poles' guys per se, because Pickens maybe isn't working out either way, but like they still want Gervon Dexter as a part of this defensive line. They're going to find maybe he's slimming down. We'll see exactly what his role is, but like there are Poles guys that are going to be a part of this, but they still want to get the Dennis Allen mold of players in here as they move on from guys, like Darrell Taylor, who they traded for from the Seahawks, or DeMarcus Walker, who, I think DeMarcus Walker could have had a fit in this defensive line somewhere, but clearly the Bears said, not really our cup of tea. Not quite what we want here. Even perhaps the most head-scratching draft pick of them all, fourth-round pick Ruben Hippolyte, was, again, I think a massive reach and a player I would not have taken with that draft pick, but this is what Dennis Allen wants. We heard it before the draft, we heard it after the draft. Dennis Allen wanted to add more speed to this Bears defense, and I think it speaks volumes that the Bears don't re-sign Jack Sanborn, perhaps the slowest of their linebackers. And again, we all love Jack Sanborn. This is not a Jack Sanborn takedown here. But the Bears don't re-sign Jack Sanborn. He goes to the Dallas Cowboys to play for Matt Eberflus. And in the draft, they go out and they draft one of the fastest linebackers in the draft in Ruben Hippolyte, way earlier than I think he should have been drafted. But still, they kind of decided we want to go in a very different direction stylistically, player-wise here. And that to me says more about the coaching change than any kind of general manager turmoil or hot seat that Ryan Poles might be sitting on. You can throw in Zay Frazier, the cornerback, in their athletic freak, long, press man-to-man physical cornerback. Like that tends to be more of Dennis Allen's style than generally what we think of Matt Eberflus preferring for more zone, more off coverage in his defense. So it just feels to me like across the board, these draft picks are about getting players that fit the coaching staff, the current coaching staff, a lot better than some of the players they inherited that were the preferences of the previous coaching staff, as opposed to like the preferences of the general manager. Because I think we've kind of seen Ryan Poles like the idea of getting great athletes. He wants the physical athletic freaks, has been generally his approach in the draft. That's been consistent across both coaching staffs. It's just like what kind of athletes they go for. That's what's changed, and that's where the likes of Ben Johnson and Dennis Allen are making their imprint more firmly seen. I think this whole thing really expands to free agency and the trades, and the offseason as a whole, I think, shows Poles' security and the coaching staff transition more than some kind of hot seat or job insecurity for Ryan Poles. So we'll take a look at like the big picture of how this roster has changed and where we can see the evidence of this from top to bottom next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our new friends at Skylight Calendar. Say goodbye to sticky notes, scribbled plans on the fridge, and overlapping calendar invites, because the Skylight Calendar is here to bring clarity to the chaos and help families stay organized without the stress. So this sleek digital display syncs with your existing calendars, Google, Apple, Outlook, and more, all making it simple to track appointments, practices, dinners, and reminders all in one easy-to-see place. I think especially with Mother's Day coming up, just like that's this next weekend, a Skylight Calendar can be a great gift because it eliminates the I didn't know excuse from your family routine and helps you see your whole week clearly on a 15-inch HD screen to help you stay focused and less overwhelmed. Right now, Skylight is offering our listeners $30 off their 15-inch calendars by going to skylightcal.com/NFL. That's skylightcal.com/NFL for $30 off your 15-inch calendar. It's SKYLIGHTCAL, skylightcal.com/NFL. this offseason as a whole has been a big roster transition that has almost felt quiet, because it hasn't been like all of the big names. It's been more like the Bears cleared a lot of the voids that were going to be gone anyway, and so it doesn't feel as monumental because Caleb Williams is still here, DeAndre Swift is still here, Cole Kmet's still here, DJ Moore is still here, Montez Sweat's still here, Edwards and Edmonds are still here, Jalen Johnson. Like, the bigger faces of the franchise, the leaders on the roster are still here. So it hasn't felt as disruptive as though, like, holy crap, this new coaching staff came in and gutted what the Bears had and replaced them with all of their guys and got rid of, all the leaders from the previous regime, because, the top names and the bigger, household talent is still here. But when you look at it in more of a totality, you can kind of see like, oh, they actually have done quite a bit of work in a way that I think kind of trickled along with, I think Tooney was kind of the big splash. I mean, I guess Drew Dahlman was a fairly big splash in free agency, but like it kind of trickled along enough that it never felt like this monumental bomb dropped of like, whoa, now it's new Bears. It's like subtly changing it over time. And now you look a couple months later and it's like, whoa, this is a very new Bears roster compared to what we thought we were working with before. Like when you stack them up, additions versus subtractions kind of side by side, I mean, you can point to 9 players that are all going to be super key contributors and or starters this season that replace, 9 guys lost. And there's a couple other stragglers beyond that from this team last year. Gone is Tevin Jenkins, replaced is Joe Tooney. Gone is Nate Davis, replaced Jonah Jackson. Gone is Coleman Shelton, replaced by Drew Dahlman. Like those are the big obvious ones that we knew right away. But like when you think about what the Bears lost and what they've replaced it with there, it's so easy to see like upgrade after upgrade after upgrade after upgrade. Dayo Odengbo comes in to replace DeMarcus Walker. Grady Jarrett comes in to bolster defensive tackle. Yeah, you lost Darrell Taylor on the edge. You don't have as much edge depth. I think like that's one of the lingering stragglers there, but you've added more on the interior between Grady Jarrett and Shamar Turner without really losing much on the interior there. But then you replace Keenan Allen with Luther Burden. You replace Gerald Everett with Colston Loveland. You replace Larry Borum with Ozzie Trapillo, right? Like across the board, it's like, bam, upgrade after upgrade after upgrade. And it just feels to me like these are moves that combine to show where Ryan Poles has a lot of security and luxury here. It's not to say that it's all young players, but Dayo Odengbo, for example, is a free agent signing that is much more about the long term than the short term, right? You sign Dayo Odengbo as a 25-year-old edge rusher who had 3 sacks last season with the idea that he's going to continue to improve, that his best football is still well in front of him, and that playing in this defense and with this scheme with these players will get even more out of him. But like Poles didn't go out and sign, give me the highest instant impact pass rusher I could get. There were plenty of veterans out there that had more experience and more proven production that wouldn't necessarily be sticking around for the long term, right? Like the guys that maybe they have another year or two in terms of good play still under their belt, but like they're kind of on the tail end looking for one last score here. And Ryan Poles passed and said, no, let's go younger here. Let's make sure we get a guy who's going to be part of the long-term future here. Because I think about some of the players that are even still out there, like Von Miller or Matthew Judon, Preston Smith, Zadarius Smith, guys that have been older, more experienced. We talk about Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, Leonard Floyd were all out there. Like there were names that you could have made a more of a sure thing, instant impact. But this is more of a longer term, like, hey, we need to be better at the pass rush, but also we have some ability to be a little bit patient with someone like Odengbo and see a brighter future than, say, like the current present with him in that spot. The Bears could have signed, a veteran offensive lineman that it is towards the tail end of the career, but what you're getting right away. Instead of trading for Jonah Jackson, you could have signed, Brandon Scherf, or you could have signed a center like Ryan Kelly, or there were some older offensive line free agents. Kevin Zeitler from the Lions, another one in that conversation, right? Where it's like, there's some question mark about Jonah Jackson, and he needs to bounce back, but it's more of a longer term, like, hey, we want this guy to be around for 2 or 3 years, and so we'll be patient with him and trust that he can become a better player than what we saw last season, instead of just going out and getting the instant impact older veteran. And don't get me wrong, he's still got instant impact older veterans like Joe Tooney and Grady Jarrett, right? Those guys are, 2 or 3 year players at most, probably at this stage of their career. It's not that everything was long-term future based, but clearly there wasn't a desperation to say, we got to squeeze every ounce out of every addition we can make all offseason. We can rely on the draft to fill some of these needs. We didn't have to go out and get a big splash left tackle or a veteran left tackle to instantly kind of take over Braxton Jones' spot. We can compete and roll with the younger players there. We can get Ozzie Trapillo in the draft. And it's not that big of a deal because I'm not worried about getting fired after one season here. Like Ryan Poles is locked in for the short and I would say medium term, with Ben Johnson. I think if he hasn't gotten a contract extension yet, one is on its way. It's almost certainly going to happen. They want to align their contract scenario so that you don't have a lame duck general manager situation. And whether he's signed the extension yet or not, I think he's certainly gotten assurances from George McCaskey, from Kevin Warren that, hey, don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. Draft as though you're going to be here for the long term because we do want you to be here for the long term here, and we'll build this thing out into the future. And then ultimately, I think Poles' job security is almost certainly mostly just going to be tied to Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams, right? Like if Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams are successful, Ryan Poles will be here as long as they are successful. And if Ben Johnson doesn't work out or Caleb Williams doesn't work out, really either one doesn't work out, then Ryan Poles will be gone when they are. And that's what we kind of knew that when he drafted Caleb Williams number 1 overall last year. And we definitely knew that when he got the chance to hire Ben Johnson as the head coach, right? If you're getting a second head coach hire here, this is it, right? And if you're getting the quarterback choice here for Caleb Williams, this is your one big swing at both of those. So now his job security is tied to them. He's not going to lose his job. I don't say not before they do, but you know what I mean? But before it's clear that if it becomes clear that either of those guys are bad, that's when Poles will lose his job. But you're not going to see Poles lose his job before we know whether Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams are going to work out and going to be parts of this team. And so that's how Ryan Poles will continue to try and build this Bears roster with long-term sustainability in mind, not just how can I keep my job by screwing the future and trying to win as many games as I can this year. You'll notice, the Bears, the only future draft pick the Bears traded for a player was for Tooney, and they traded to get that pick back from the Rams in a trade down in the draft. So they got, they're not leveraging their future salary cap space. They're not leveraging their future draft picks to go all in on this season to try and save Ryan Poles' job. We do want to win a lot more games this season and need to win a lot more games this season, but we also need to be smart about how we build this team so that it doesn't just contend in 2025, but goes even bigger and farther in 2026 and 2027. And ultimately, I think that's what's in the best interest of the franchise. Even if you're not a big Ryan Poles fan, you should at least be glad that he wasn't trying to sacrifice the future for the present along through this whole process. And if you're not a big Ryan Poles fan, I think you're going to need to get used to it for another couple of years here at a minimum. I think he's going to be here for a while, along with Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams. And so, you can find some solace in trying to root for the Chicago Bears to be successful, even if you have your own doubts about the general manager. Generally, I think Ryan Poles is at least an average GM in the NFL, and you can definitely do a lot worse than Ryan Poles. And we'll see the head coaching hire and the quarterback decision will really say a lot about his ability as a GM. He makes mistakes sometimes. He's going to make more mistakes in the future. Every GM makes mistakes sometimes, and generally he's done fairly well in the draft outside of the third round and some of the later picks, but he's hit the important ones for the most part. So I think Ryan Poles will be just fine, and he's operating like things are going to be just fine. We'll keep breaking down his draft class and some undrafted rookie free agents all throughout the coming days and weeks here in the Locked On Bears podcast. Rookie minicamp coming up right around the corner. We'll stay on top of that for you on Locked On Bears. So make sure you hit the subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you're looking for a second listen, be sure to check out the Locked On NFL podcast on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, because it comes out twice a day, once with Tyler Rowland in the morning and then in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins. And I co-hosted on Tuesday mornings with Tyler. We talked about Aaron Rodgers and whether the Steelers should just stop waiting and move on without Aaron Rodgers. We talked about potential Jalen Ramsey trade. We talked about potential tight end trades of Mark Andrews and Michael Myers, and we talked about Trey Hendrickson, and then we talked about some lingering free agents like Keenan Allen. We talked about a little Chicago Bears action in there, and Amari Cooper, one of the other free agent wide receivers. So a lot more football talk over on Locked On NFL. Make that your second listen. Coming back tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Bears as your first listen once again for another opportunity to bear down.